If you are trying to decide how to choose the best Montessori floor bed, you are in the right place. Today I'm going to be sharing my top Montessori floor bed frames as well as how to choose the one that makes the most sense for your family. And if you guys are new here, my name is Rachel from The Confused Mom. Welcome to my channel. I share baby and toddler product reviews, activities, as well as Montessori at home tips. And this is a follow-up video. In the first video, I talk about what floor beds are and answer all of the frequently asked questions about safety, transition. So definitely be sure to go back and check that video out next. In the description box below, you'll find links to shop everything I mentioned today, as well as chapters. Let's jump into how to choose the best one for your family. There are 6 main things I want you to consider. Number 1 is going to be the size of the bed. Floor beds come in toddler sizing, which is just your basic crib mattress, twin, full, and queen, and you can even DIY plans for a king-sized floor bed. Now, personally, I don't recommend the toddler bed, which is a crib mattress size, largely because it's so short-lived and not very comfortable for adults doing bedtime routines. There's not really enough room to sit on the bed and read a book with them, so you kind of have to sit next to the bed, and kids typically outgrow it by the time they're like 3 years old. On the flip side though, you don't want a bed so big that it actually can scare the child. This happened to us when my daughter turned 3. We had a spare queen mattress in our house because I converted our guest room into my office, and so I was like, oh, this is great, let's just give it to her. No. The bed was so big that my perfect sleeper suddenly stopped sleeping, and she would tell us the bed is too big, and she ended up going back to her crib mattress on the floor. My personal opinion and experience, a twin or full-size bed is a really great if your child is going to be sleeping alone in it. There's plenty of room for you to get into bed with them, read a book, do the bedtime routine, but not so much room that they feel like I'm really alone in this giant space and it's freaking me out. Now, on the flip side, my son is 2 years old. He bed shares with us, so a king bed makes perfect sense. So it really depends on if they're going to be sleeping by themselves, and if so, choosing the right size bed, and if anybody else is going to be sleeping in the bed with them, making sure everyone has enough space. The second thing to think about are rails or no rails. Traditionally, a Montessori floor bed that really promotes independence is not going to have any rails because you want that full freedom of movement. However, most floor beds on the market do have some sort of rail system attached to them. There are 3 situations where I would say rails definitely make sense. Number 1, if your child was already in a crib and they're already used to those rails, switching to a floor bed that has a rail system is going to feel more familiar and can ease the transition. It's not necessary by any means, but it can be a nice stepping stone if your child is having a hard time with the transition. The next thing to consider are safety concerns. So especially if you have a younger baby or toddler going into the floor bed and the bed is pushed up against the wall, it does create a small gap between the mattress and the wall that could pose a safety hazard. And in that case, you would want to have a rail separating the two, so that way the child can't roll in and get wedged between that gap. Other times that you would want to have a railing system is if there's not a clearance around the bed that's about the height of the child. So if they were to roll out, would they possibly injure themselves? So for instance, behind me here, if my child were to roll out of this side of the bed over here, the gap between the bed and the ladder could pose a safety hazard. So some parents might want to put a rail up there. But one thing to keep in mind in not overly railing the bed, if there is a clearance about the height of the child, rolling is a natural part of them learning the edge of the bed. And this is a much better time for them to find the edge when they're on the floor versus when they're on a raised 10-inch platform. So you kind of do want them to go through the process of falling out of the bed a couple times. Now, if it's something that is lasting for weeks and it's disrupting their sleep, you may want to put rails back on there, but don't be concerned if your child rolls out of the bed a handful of times when they're first learning the edges. Next thing to consider when choosing a Montessori floor bed is going to be, is it for a single use or multiple kids? If you plan to have multiple kids who ultimately share a room, you might want to consider a bunk bed situation like this so that your older child can be in the floor bed, and then once your younger child is ready to move into a floor bed, the older child can move up to the higher bed. Another option for this would be to consider a trundle bed setup. When your child is young enough where you want them on a floor bed, you'd put them on the base trundle, and then you have that upper bed in case you need to sleep in the room with them. You can comfortably do so. And when they are ready to move up to that higher bed, the trundle bed can either be for a younger sibling, it can be rolled under for guests, or you can take the mattress out and use that as an under bed storage drawer. That is a nice little alternative as well to really get more lifespan out of a floor bed. Next thing to consider is the overall slat and raise of the bed. So there are some Montessori floor beds out there that is literally just an open wooden rectangular frame with nothing in the middle, and you're just supposed to throw the bed down in that. Do not get that. Mattresses should never be placed directly on the floor for health reasons. So just say no to those. If you do opt for one of those, because they are typically a little more budget friendly, make sure you purchase your own set of rolling slats. On the flip side, if you want to do a really cheap Montessori floor or bed, you could just buy the set of slats and put your mattress directly on top of that. But regardless, you never want to put a mattress directly on the floor. If you are keeping your bed on the floor, please pick it up like once a week, sit it up vertically, let it air out, and give your mattress a chance to just kind of like recalibrate. Don't just always leave it on the floor. Most floor beds are only raised about an inch off the ground, but there are certain floor bed frames like this one, which are extremely low profile, only a little bit off the ground. And then as your kid gets older, you actually can flip it upside down and it will add a little bit more height to match your child where they're at. There are some out there that have some very customizable raises. So if you don't want like a trundle bed or a bunk bed situation, but you want something that's going to grow with your child, I would look for ones that have that option to raise the legs higher. Next thing to consider is going to be styles. Most Montessori aligned style floor bed is going to be a natural color with a minimal design like these. However, today a lot of floor beds marketed as Montessori come with these adorable house frames or cabin feels. Now these are pretty much in direct opposition to what Montessori wanted, as they encourage fantasy play, and she was not a proponent of that for this age. However, there is no harm and they're super cute and whimsical, and your kids are only little ones. In terms of my favorite floor beds, I have an entire blog post reviewing the top 7 as well as like DIY plans and some budget friendly hacks. I will link in the description box below. But my top 3 beds are going to be from Sprout. Number 1, they're definitely like the go-to gold standard of Montessori furniture for kids. They have 2 options, the Sofa and the Montessori birch floor bed. Both of these can really go with your child. The Montessori birch floor bed is a flippable bed, so you can go ahead and raise that taller as your kid gets older. The Sofa is really a fully customizable option where you can choose how many rails are on it, where they're placed, change out the legs as your child gets older. Both are really smart designs made in the USA by a small Utah-based company. And I have a discount code for that, TCM10 I think it is, or try TCM. They change out my code a lot, so one of those should work. And then in terms of if you have siblings or want a 2-bed situation in the room for whatever reason with guests or anything, obviously you can go with a bunk bed situation like this. We personally chose this L shape here because the gap between most bunk beds is actually pretty low, and we found this was just a more comfortable setup. My kids also like to jump on their bed, so this gave them that opportunity to do that. And we can use the little gaps over here for storage of books or any personal toys and things like that. And this was kind of like dead space in the room anyway. And then the other option is going to be a trundle bed, and for that I definitely recommend going ahead and splurging with Pottery Barn, just because they have such brilliant systems set up with a universal trundle, and then you can get this universal guardrail which attaches to the trundle bed. If you are starting your child on a trundle bed and you have the full bed set up, so instead of just the trundle on the floor but you also have the upper bed attached to it, you're going to want a safety rail between the two so they don't slide through the gap underneath it. The universal guardrail that Pottery Barn sells only works with the upper beds, not the trundle frames, unfortunately, but that one should have you covered. Again, in the blog post I cover even more of those. I would love to hear in the comments below, did you guys try a floor bed? Did it work for you? Did it not work for you? What brands did you guys like? Any tips you have for other families to make this work for them? If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend, hit that subscribe and notification bell, because I'm going to be taking you guys through our Montessori playroom and Montessori kitchen setup. In the meantime, be sure to go ahead, check out my tips for how to set up a Montessori bedroom, and until next time, have a good one.